I think we are at time, so we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Gaurav. I'm a Principal Group Product Manager in the Microsoft Purview Data Governance team. I have with me Blesson, who is my colleague in the Purview team. And together, today we'll be talking about how you can maximize the business value of your data with Microsoft Purview. So this is an overview session where we'll talk about what we are doing with respect to our strategy with Microsoft Purview Data Governance in terms of the approach that we have. We'll also show you in-product demos where Blesson would be walking live through the service and kind of showcasing you how you can set the foundations of doing effective data governance with Microsoft Purview Data Governance. We'll also show you what's happening with respect to the customer case studies, right? And then we'll open up for questions and some useful resources that we have to share. We also have another session right after this where we talk about the updates and roadmap. So we'll be very light in terms of the updates and roadmap in this session, and we'll cover all of those in the next upcoming session that we have, I think, in another 30 minutes after this one. So with that, we'll get started, and I'll talk about some of the trends. Like, we have been in generally available service for close to 16 months now, and there are some key trends that we have observed as we've been working with customers. And to most of you, these would be not new, as you guys have been working in this world for a while, where more and more systems are connecting to data, which means that there is a whole proliferation of your data in your data state. More and more systems are throwing data. You need to essentially make sense of that. There are more environments, and more customers are embracing the hybrid nature. Like, we are embracing the hybrid nature of customers' data state because data is all over the place, whether it's on-prem, multi-cloud, SaaS sources. There are more systems in place now, which means, again, with the proliferation of your data estate, there are more complex architectures in place, multiple systems, fit-for-purpose tools in every organization that we work with. Then there are these data regulations. Every year we see there's a new regulation in place. We saw GDPR, SHRIMS, and in US there is CCPA, and there's much more that keep on coming every time. Also, we see that the types of users in an organization keeps on increasing with the data producers and consumers and the persona of those, whether you are a data scientist, data engineer, information worker, a curator, a steward. So we are seeing a lot of those personas and different ways, and customers are looking to organize that for their data governance implementations. And then you will see that most of the customers want to have governance from get-go, which means starting from their source data systems to any transformations that are happening in your ETL pipelines, to your data warehouses, to your presentation layer with Power BI, Looker, Tableau. You want to make sure that your governance operations are not disconnected from data operations. So this is something customers want from get-go along the entire life cycle. So if we think about that, the data operations and governance are becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. Now, what that means is that you have data agility and you want to make sure that there is right use of data and your data is understandable, it is it is of high quality and accessible, and there are different personas, as I mentioned, on this end of the spectrum. And ultimately, you want to ensure right use of data so that you're operating within the compliance boundaries. You're making sure that you understand the risk profile of the data so that your CPOs or chief information security officers or chief data officers understand what's going on. So we are seeing this role called CDOs emerge in almost every organization that we talk to, and that role is also becoming more and more interdisciplinary. So with that, we launched this service called Microsoft Purview close to 16 months ago in general availability. And we had some core principles around making sure that it embraces the hybrid nature of your data estate, which means it is hybrid. It is unified across your stack. It's a platform-based approach that we are taking, and I'll talk about that more in the next slide. And it is open. From get-go, we have made sure that our whole ecosystem is open and extensible, which means that you can come and add more types to the system underneath the hoods. We are using open source Apache Atlas. You can use our open API support to extend the system for sources we do not support. And there are a bunch of things that you benefit if other customers contribute to that ecosystem as well, right? Because at the end of the day, the open API support makes it all available. So with that, if I were to kind of talk about what is our approach with Microsoft Purview Data Governance. So it's a platform-based approach where we have this data map, which is part of our Purview platform on the bottom. And there are scanners that go out to your hybrid data estate, whether it's on-prem, multi-cloud SaaS sources, and they essentially build this data map. And think of this data map as a graph where we're capturing key pieces of information like your technical metadata. So what's the column name, what's the column type, what's the description, along with the lineage information, so that starting from the raw data to your transformations, to your ETL processes, to your presentation layer with Power BI, you are able to stitch that end-to-end lineage both at an object level and also at a column level. So it unlocks use cases like root cause analysis. So let's say your Power BI dashboard is not loading. You can go down to the raw data set, whether it is Oracle, whether it is SQL, and understand what changed along the journey, starting from the raw data to the transformation processes that is preventing this dashboard from loading. Not only that, you can also do impact analysis. So if you're a data engineer, you are working on some ETL process and updating that, you can know that if I were to change this column in the database, what impact will it have downstream and upstream? So today you go to your Power BI, you can see there is a lineage, but that's local to the Power BI workspace. It does not know anything on the left and the right. It starts from after the data has landed into your Power BI workspace, and from there on, it can tell you the entire life cycle, but doesn't know anything on the left, doesn't know anything on the right. That is where Purview comes in. Think of it as a horizontal solution across all your data systems, your analytical systems, your operational workflows, or your ETL workflows, and this essentially stitches that end-to-end lineage together for you to unlock value. Another type of metadata that we are capturing is what we call as semantic metadata. So again, as these scanners are running, we are also classifying the data to say this column is a social security number, or this column is an Australia tax file number. And today we have 200 plus classifiers out of the box across different domains like personal, government, security, and we are continuously looking to add more. Along with that, you can bring your own classifications as well. So you could say that I have a transaction ID column in my database, and I can represent the semantics of that using a regular expression or data dictionary to say if there are these 8 values, tag the column as transaction ID, and you can specify confidence levels to say that only if there's a 90% match, then do that. So all of those customizations are available for you. Along with this classification, we also support Microsoft information protection labels. So earlier they were only limited to the Office ecosystem, but now you can extend it to your SQL columns, to your Cosmos DB collections, and all of that with Microsoft Purview Data Governance as well. And then there is business metadata. So a lot of our users are business users, and excuse me, they don't understand things like Cosmos DB collections or SQL columns. They come to Purview and they're searching for terms like percentage sales, percentage revenue. So you can essentially build this whole business layer on top of the physical layer. So when we essentially scan, we are capturing the physical metadata. But what we have enabled is this whole capability around Purview meta model, which allows you to add a business layer on top to say, this particular physical asset is part of this organization, has one-to-one relationship with this domain. So you can essentially build that whole business layer. You can stamp business glossary. We have a full-blown business glossary that is exposed through our catalog application, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you can define that business taxonomy and kind of assign that business taxonomy again to the physical assets. And then when I talk about catalog, you can browse and search using that business taxonomy as well. So you can see there are different types of metadata. Another type is ownership metadata, right? So bunch of metadata, crowd metadata that we are working to enable, and we'll continue to make our data map richer and richer. So the more rich the data map is, the powerful the applications on top would be, right? Because ultimately the applications on top are unlocking value from the data that is captured in the map. Now, it's a platform-based approach because this scanning of your data state, building this relationship graph, and think of this as a knowledge graph that we are building, is done once. Because for each of the purpose-built applications on top, you're not rinsing and repeating. And that's where, if you look at the market today, there is a lot of vertical solutions which kind of does that rinse and repeat again and again. But that's the whole purpose of us embracing this platform-based approach, is that it is done only once. Now, there's a set of purpose-built applications on top, starting with Data Catalog, which allows you to browse and search information in the Purview data map. And they are able to do that blazing fast because it is fully backed by an Elasticsearch index. It gives you intelligent recommendations, suggestions, has a business glossary experience on it, as well as I talked about that you can put a business semantics on top and use that to search information from the map as well. And because we are creating this relationship graph, we know that if you search with, let's say, an attribute inside a business term, we know that this attribute is related to this business term. This business term has been tagged to these, 100 physical assets in your map. So we're able to present all of that information in an intuitive user experience that we have with Data Catalog, which Blesson will walk you when he does the demo. Then there is data sharing. With data sharing, the scenarios include that once you have discovered your data, you want to share the actual data inside or outside your organization. So we have enabled this in-place sharing capability where we are not creating copies of the data. It's all done in a manner where it's essentially underneath the hoods, the right set of ACLs get enabled and you're able to share that data. This capability is in public preview and hence is marked as gray. Rest all is generally available, where you're able to do that with your storage assets today. And we just released that where you can essentially do this, and as all of that information kind of comes back to the data map, so you can essentially use the catalog to search for all of your shared information as well. So that capability is in public preview now and for you guys to use. Then there is data estate insights. So as I mentioned, these are purpose-built applications for different personas. The first two one for data producers, consumers, think of your data engineers, data scientists. The right one are, think of that for the chief data officers or their office. Now, as a CDO or their office, you want to understand things like how is my data distributed across my data estate? Is it all on-prem, SQL, Oracle, Teradata? Or you want to understand the risk profile of the data. So is it all social security number or credit card number, where exactly it is? So there's a set of out-of-the-box reports that we have enabled here. And then we also expose the underneath data set, because what we have realized working with organizations is that there's always a custom KPI that they're looking to track. So you can take that underneath data set, slice and dice it in 10 different ways, and do that and make those KPIs available to you as well. Now, there's a bunch of work that we are doing to make it easier, which I'll talk about in the roadmap session. And then there is data policies. Now, in the data policy, this is a very important one for us, where essentially, so far, you guys have been used to what we call as role-based access control, where you put people in roles and you control access based on that. But again, with the proliferation of your data estate, you want to control access more and more on the attributes of data. You want to essentially put policies around DevOps scenario. You want to essentially do policies around data movement or data sharing. So there's a lot of investment that we are doing in this particular ecosystem. Some things are already there. This is a GA application, so some of the policies are available in general availability. Some are in preview, which we'll talk about more once we go in this particular section. But here, essentially, think of it is that we are trying to enable these policies where with the proliferation of your data, you're doing things like give access to Gaurav Malhotra or all PII data before 9 a.m. So you're trying to control access based on the attribute of the data, which is PII, which was stamped onto your data state by our classification engine. So you'll be able to come to Purview, write those policies, and we'll be able to enforce those. So that's essentially our approach with these purpose-built applications, and all of these are available through our unified experience, which we call as Purview Studio, which Blesson will walk you through. And then Purview as a service is tightly integrated with other services. So today, if you go in your Synapse Analytics workspace, you can do a Purview-powered search if you have hooked it up with a Purview account. So imagine in your organization, there are thousands of Synapse workspaces. If they are hooked up to the same Purview account, because our guidance to customers is to create a single Purview account, because if you understood the approach, then you would imagine that if you create multiple Purview accounts, you're distributing the knowledge in your organization with multiple maps. And we want the organization to have this centralized knowledge graph, which is the data map. So the guidance is one. Now, there are scenarios where they would want to create more, but we are actually working to see how we can address those. Again, I'll talk more about that in my roadmap session. But for now, our guidance is to create one map. Now, imagine for your 1,000 Synapse workspaces, all of those are hooked up to a single Purview account. Then your data scientists, data engineers are able to search across your entire organization, not only limited to the Synapse workspace. So those are the use cases that it unlocks from embedded search experience perspective. So the next set of slides kind of talk about, which I kind of covered in the first. So I'll go quickly over those and pass it over to Blesson for demo. So essentially with the Purview platform, we have this whole automatic data discovery layer, which as I mentioned, we've embraced the hybrid nature of your data state. We have today 56 connectors that are available in public preview or journal availability. And there are a few that are in private preview that I'll talk about, and we are continuously looking to add more. We already have an industry-leading partnership that gives us 100+ connectors. We are just incrementally working to light those up in the stack. Then I talked about the data classification and labeling ecosystem that we have enabled with it from a tagging perspective. And then all of this is serverless, no code. It's plug and play model where you just come in, you register the source, you tell us how often you want this scan to run. We provision the infra, we scale it up and down to give you the best in class performance. Now with data map, the key part here is, as I mentioned, there are different types of metadata that we are unlocking around, semantic metadata, business metadata. There is essentially things about health, location, entitlements that we are working on in future. So that's what this slide is kind of listing. And then there are APIs and SDK support at every level for you to take that and kind of extend that ecosystem as well, again, with our support with the open source Apache Atlas. Right now, we are on Atlas 2.2, which unlocks a lot of value from an extensibility standpoint. Now, from a catalog perspective, as I mentioned, this kind of enables the self-serve search scenarios, browse and search scenarios. There's a full-blown business glossary experience. You can tag that business context, use that business context to search information in the map as well. And then from a data estate insights perspective, as I mentioned, there are these out-of-the-box reports, whether you want to do understand data asset distribution, you want to understand data classification, business glossary, how are those business terms tagged, or you want to understand the health in your organization, like how many assets are curated. And there's a definition of curation that we have defined today, or how many assets have owners defined, right? The biggest problem that we see is like a lot of organizations don't even know who to reach out for certain data sets because they have no ownership information. So with this, you'll be able to understand what assets have ownership, how can you drive towards 100% ownership, and how we can help you to enforce those standards as well. And then there's set of stuff that we are working towards in future. Now, as I mentioned, there is whole ecosystem that we want to develop for first-party and third-party integration, right? So the whole Sentinel integration that exists today, you can think of that as a first-party integration on how it has integrated with the Purview data map, again, with our full compatibility with open source Apache Atlas. And similarly, how the prophecy solution kind of does this from a master data management perspective today, where they have again done this with the open source Apache Atlas support and kind of use that to enable this master data management solution. Now, with the policy app, as I also mentioned, that there are different types of policies that we are working towards. So again, from a customer perspective, you will author that in simple English language. We will essentially take that and kind of translate that to what it means to implement in different systems across different resource providers in the Microsoft cloud. And the way we essentially these policies are going to work is that you'll come and define those, and we are booting up these enforcement points in different resource providers like storage, like SQL, like Cosmos DB, and eventually everything in the Microsoft cloud, which will enforce these policies for you. And not only that, we are also publishing an open SDK, which if you integrate with your on-prem systems, then you can essentially use it to enforce policies across your on-prem data state as well, which means that from a enforcement perspective, we want your entire data state to be covered. Obviously, we'll get there in click stops, and Blesson will cover about that more. But that's our approach from get-go to keep the ecosystem open. And then from a data sharing perspective, as I mentioned, you can do sharing inside or outside your organization. There's no coding required. There is whole data producer and data consumer scenarios that it enables with what to share, who to share with, and then from a consumer perspective, you can essentially tell them where to receive this particular information that the producer wants to share. So all of that is available, again, fully managed, no coding required from your end. You just set up your shares and you do that. Now, everything is a source by source discussion, and hence I intentionally said that the sharing is only enabled for storage. Eventually, we want to enable it for other sources as well, but again, we'll get there in click stops, if you will. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Blesson to walk you through the product live and kind of showcase a bunch of these capabilities in action. Blesson?
Thanks, Gaurav. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure how many of you have seen Purview in action, so let's take it for a drive. It is an Azure service, so what you do first is you can search for it in the marketplace, and you will be able to see Purview come up. You can click on this, you will be able to create a Purview account. It's like any other service. You would give the subscription, the RG that you want, resource group you want to put it in. You would fill in the configuration details, and then you can click review and create Purview. Once you have created Purview, the first opening screen that you would see will be, I'll just skip the creation step, but once you have created Purview, this is the UI that you would see. Here you will be able to look at the properties, etc., for governing Purview itself. So this is a portal that you would click, and it should take you right into the Purview catalog. So this is the opening screen that you would see. Now, when Gaurav was covering the presentation, he said that you will be able to scan your entire data estate. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to scan one of the storage accounts that I've got in my data estate. I create a logical container. So I'm going to just name it SQL bits, and I can assign myself to be the collection admin. Just create it. Once I've created the collection, which is a logical container for holding all the data assets, I will be able to go ahead and create an asset or scan an asset within that particular container. So this is where I would register a data source. I'm going to type in ADLS. This is a storage account. It's a ADLS Gen 2. I click that. I can give it a name. So again, I'm going to give bits storage account. is just a name that you're giving. You can specifically select which subscription it belongs to, and then the account name. So it can be any of this. I'm going to take this one. And you would see there is a toggle over here which says, do you want to manage permissions on these accounts? It's called the data use management. So if you enable that, from that point onwards, you will be able to control the permissions for accessing that storage from within Purview. I'm going to enable this, and I'm going to click register. We'll then register the data source, as you can see over here, and I can then kick off a scan. What the scan does is it will automatically run, look at the data within your storage account and then create a map. So it is getting populated into our data map so the users can then come in and search for it. So we'll just say scan 1. And I can use multiple ways in which I can connect. Here I'm using MSI. Basically, I've given the storage on the storage account. I've given the MSI for Purview read access, and that will allow me. I can just quickly check whether I've got access. And if it doesn't, what you do is you would go ahead and add it. So I can just quickly go to the storage account. And it was SQL. Let's see over here. You can then come in here, and then go into the IAM and add a job function. So you want to give it reader access on that particular storage level. So you would give the blob reader permission, and you will be able to pick up the identity for Purview. So it is all system generated, and it is the name of the Purview account. It is policy demo 123. Once you've given that, you will be able to view assign it. So when that step is complete, and it will take some time for it to replicate, but then once it is done, you should be able to see that it does the test connection should go through fine, but there is a lag between the time when it takes to connect in. So once you have done that, hope it does it this time, hoping it is the IP address as well. So I'm just going to skip that step because you got few additional storage accounts that I've got scanned here. You can see over here that I've scanned some of these accounts, and what I will do is quickly then go into something like searching for certain assets. So once you have scanned, the automatic scan, once it has completed, you will be able to search for that, like say, for example, order details. If I have got any assets related to that, then I'll be able to find it. Here I've got order. I typed it wrong. Let's see. You can see order details.csv, which is a file that I've got somewhere in the storage account. It clearly shows that where exactly it is kept. It's in the SQL ADLS Gen 2, and it is in the sales data folder. You got the CSV file there. I can then go through what are the properties, when was this file updated, what is the schema for that, and if there is a lineage for it, it comes from a SQL database. There is a ADF pipeline that is used, and it is moving data as a CSV file. If I've got access to that ADF, then I will be able to go in and even view what is going on with that particular data factory. So this is just giving you an end-to-end view of how this is working. But that is just one aspect of what the catalog is offering. The browse, you will be able to use the browse capability where you will be able to browse through the different data assets and then search for it. Searching for it is another option, or you can browse it based on the data data type, data assets that they belong to, like SQL or storage, etc. Then you can also create a business asset, or what Gaurav was referring to as the meta model. So you are enriching the data that you have to enable businesses to make more sense of it. So you can think of it as though it is like you've got a map in front of you, and then you are naming the cities and towns that are there. The same way, when you've got data, you need to understand which business unit does it belong to, et cetera. You will be able to build that over here. It's quite intuitive in the sense that you will be able to use it in a pretty straightforward way by saying, okay, it is a data domain, what is the name of it? And then you can build relationships on the back of it. Once you have done that, you can tag your data to that particular meta model. The final one in this particular app side is the glossary, where you will be able to define glossary terms. I've got a glossary term for sales data, and I've associated it back to the order details table that I've got here. So the first step, as you saw, was scanning your environment using the scan functionality. Once you've scanned it, you've got the data imported, and you will then be able to search for it. You will be able to tag it, use meta model to give more business context to it. The other aspect we saw is how you will be able to get insights of all the data that you have got in your estate. Here it shows that what amount or what percentage of data I've got it curated. When I say curated, you have given tags like glossary terms or added lineage or any other meta model information that you have added will count towards curating that data. And for each of the data assets that you have got inside your catalog, you will be able to assign honors to it. So here I've got quite a lot of data assets that are not owned. Some of it are assigned owners, etc. So you've got pretty much a whole raft of report that you can run against this. And you can also check out what are the common search terms that you're using, how many users you've got, what are the searches that have happened over the past few days, what sort of data asset splits that you've got. You can split it by the data types. You can see that I've got some SQL Server, I got ADLS Gen 2, etc., split across the board. And even with Data Factory, you will be able to just, the lineage that you saw where I was showing the data being picked up from SQL and then being pushed into the storage account, you really don't have to do much other than writing the ADF pipeline and then making sure Purview has visibility to it. So it automatically then pushes down the lineage into the catalog, and it knows which data does it belong to. And you can check out whether there are any glossary terms that are assigned, any classifications that you have put against the data, there is against any of the data sources, etc. Any sensitivity labels that you've got against your data set, you will be able to drill down into all of those. Now, let's quickly go on to the data policy as well. There was one thing I wanted to show before we go. The data share piece. You will be able to share your data from within ADLS Gen 2. You can see over here, I have got a data curated. I can list down any contacts. Like I can edit the content and say, for example, Gaurav to be an expert for this, and then I can put to be the data owner. Then I just click and save. From that point onwards, that's own data, and you would be able to see all the information about it. Here you are able to share the data with external customers as well as your internal team. So you can just create a new data share, and you will be able to share that data using in-place share, which is one of the new capabilities that we have brought in with Purview. So over to the final piece, which is around data policy. We've got 3 different types of data policies. One is where you are curating like an overarching RBAC policy that you will be able to author. If you remember when I was doing the scan, I clicked on something called as data use management. And from that point onwards, I will be able to create, say, policy and So here I'm defining a data policy that will grant access to any of the ADLS accounts over here. So I'm going to use ADLS Gen 2 here. And I can precisely say what data I want to give access to, or if I'm not interested in that one, sales, or I can pick any of those assets and then grant access. So in order for our use case, I'm going to just give access to that stock price and give access to myself. So this will actually, this is a policy. It's very intuitive to build a policy that will allow read access to the stock price folder in my ADLS Gen 2. I can just save it. I can give it a description here, stock price, and I can then save it. Once I've saved it, I can then push it down. I need to publish it to whichever ADLS Gen 2 that I need to associate it to. So if there are multiple of them that have the same folder, I can just assign it like this. So you will be able to do something along these lines. I'll just publish it over here. You can see I've published it against 2 of them. If they have the same structure, you will be able to do that. Now, going over to another one of our capabilities is where you are able to do DevOps policies for SQL, where you've got 500 or 600 instances of SQL, and you wanted to manage them all together with certain set of users having privileges to audit, look at the audit logs, etc. You will be able to create a policy that governs all of these SQL instances from just one click of a button. So here you would say what SQL instance that you want to govern, and you will be able to do that from here. Another of the capability that I wanted to show, this is a use case I will pretty much show today, is where you can see that I have got access to one of the SQL instances that is a product table over here. It's a product table, and if, say, for example, I'm going to create a report or generate something that will show me, yeah, there's a question I've got. Do you plan to add data quality or profiling feature, and when? Yes, we are working on it, and we will be announcing that when we are ready with it. So that is so coming back to where we were. I've got a product table. Now I want to find out which products are the most selling products in my organization. If I have to generate that report, I only have access to one of the tables. So what I can do is intuitively, what would you look for if you were to find out how many products are getting sold or which products are getting sold? So I'll just type in sales, potentially, and see whether I get any data related to sales. So you can see that I've got few data related to sales. So I'm going to click on the first one over here. I can check out the properties. I can check out the schema. I'm looking for anything that would help me identify. I can see that there is a product ID. Probably I can get the count of the product ID and then build something around it. And I can see where this data is also getting dropped into. I can see a couple of times it's being shipped into the data lake as text file and as well as one as CSV. There are no contacts. There are some related items as well. So I can see this, and based on that, I can request access. I can not only just request access for myself, but I could request access on behalf of somebody else. So here, I'm going to request access for myself. And what happens at this point in time is that a workflow is getting triggered. And this workflow has been created and has been assigned at the collection. If you remember, there was a logical container where I had put the storage account which I was about to scan. So if you look over here in the authoring section, I have got a workflow which says when somebody requests access for the data, go through the approval process. These are the people who should approve it. Send them reminders after 3 days if they don't approve it. and the, the request should expire after a week. And what it also checks is that whether somebody has approved that request. And once they have approved the request, it checks whether the data use management is enabled on that particular data source. If it is not enabled, it would go into the manual provisioning piece, or else it'll go into automatic provisioning. In this case, I've got the SQL Server already enabled for data use management. So when I create or approve this request, a self-service policy gets generated. You can see a third policy just got created a few seconds ago, granting me access to the order details table. At this point, I should then be able to go ahead and select on the table, and there was no intervention from anyone apart from the approver approving my request. And you can see this over here. If you look initially, I'm going to force the cache to be refreshed at this point in time, just so that this is an admin account. If I run the SQL statement, you can see initially, I'm only having access. You will be able to see who are the people who is having access from the SQL engine, and you can see that the person who is having access is having access only to the product table. I'm just going to force refresh the cache in the interest of time, because it usually takes somewhere between 1 to 5 minutes post the creation of self-service for the cache to be refreshed automatically. So once that is done, you can see a couple of new policies got created, and this should be aligned to that order details table that you see over here. So as a user, I will be able to come back in here and run the query that I have built or I want to run and get the count for the most selling products. So if I were to do something like this, there you go. I can run the query, and you can see that I'm joining the two tables over there. The final piece I just wanted to show over here is our integration with Synapse Workspace. So you will be able to integrate with Synapse Workspace. So it's policy demo. You can click on this and click apply. There is resources. As soon as if you've got any issues with the permissioning or things like that, there is a hyperlink over there. You can just check what permissions you need to give for Purview to be able to connect. So you can see that Purview got connected at this point in time. And what it allows you to do is, if you remember, I created a policy that allowed me access to one of the CSV files or the sales order. But you can see that now I'm searching against the Purview to find out any CSVs or any storage file that I've got. And what I can then do is run a select query against it. If I've got access to that data set, I should be able to see all the data that is there. And if I do not have access to it, it'll deny. But then what I can always do is also request access from here. This should trigger the same process that you saw earlier, where I was creating a policy and then I will be granted access. With that, I'll pause here and give it to Gaurav. Feel free to ask us any questions. I'll take it.
That he talked about allows you to control who has access to see what in your organization. It's a very important point because, as you would imagine, this is implemented for Microsoft as well. And within the finance organization, there are certain databases that Amy Hood doesn't want everyone in Microsoft to be able to discover. So you can control access using that logical container as well, and essentially enable that select set of our people in your organizations are in your organization is only able to see those assets. Then you saw how once we have set up the map, how easy it is to populate the map. And then once the map is populated, how you can consume information from the map using a search experiences. And then how you can request access for assets if you don't have that access right from there using our business workflow capability, which is fully customizable. Because you saw there what we have done is we've embedded logic apps as a workflow engine. with the same user experience. So if you want to add additional step to call your Jira system for some, or an HTTP endpoint with some custom logic, you can do that. And then you saw that data state insights, how we are able to essentially use that to give insights into your data state, understand the risk profile of the data, and those are reports, out of the box reports with custom data sets that are also available. You can drill down in those reports to understand more information. And then you saw with the policy ecosystem how you can enable right use of data with different sets of policies. So generally, you will see that customers would come and say, "Oh, I want to do enforcement on this particular table." So that's the use case. But you can see that there's a whole life cycle to enable that, because first you need to understand what data you have in your organization, and that's where we have started. That's where we have started to map your entire data state so that we can start to unlock value on the top with these purpose-built applications. And you saw example of some of that today with the demo. So we have a bunch of customer case studies that are published with British Petroleum on how they are using Purview in their data mesh architecture, with essentially mapping their entire data state and kind of getting rid with their manual processes, which were earlier using Excel. And now they are able to automatically understand what data exists. It is always up to date because these scanning systems are running continuously to essentially keep that data map up to date. Similarly, with Heathrow Airport as well, on how they have used Purview to essentially, again, map their data state and start to use these applications with catalog, with share to kind of unlock different use cases. And then there are examples around Grundfos, who's a pump manufacturer, Danish pump manufacturer, and with Limity Bank as well. So all of these are public. I'll leave those in the deck for you guys to kind of read and understand more information. And then we have a set of sources for you to kind of understand and get started with Purview, engage with the engineering, and kind of have feedback and all as well. So with that, if there are any questions, feel free to ask. I see there are certain questions on the screen. So the business glossary, is it possible to end this in a web page, or does users need to use Purview portal? So the business glossary is an experience inside our Purview data catalog application, but it has full-blown bulk import-export capability as well. So if you have another system, you could essentially map it into a CSV file. You can bulk import into Purview, then assign those business contexts onto physical assets in the map. You can bulk export out as well. So all of those capabilities are available, and we are continuously looking to enhance those more and more as well. Uh, do you have any best practices on how to organize the logical containers, business-centric or technical-centric? So that's a great question. So generally, the way to think about collection hierarchy is that how do you want to essentially enable access control in your system for your data map, the graph that you're building? And that's what you should keep in mind. If the way to do that is using your business hierarchy, meaning finance, marketing, and all, then you should kind of create that. I have an example where a customer kind of have done that with their data centers. They have different data centers in Europe, in North America, in Asia, and they have used that to kind of control the role-based access in their organization. So totally depends on the use case and the scenario that you're working to unlock. Can we add Databricks in Purview? Databricks is already supported. So with Databricks, there is the Hive Metastore implementation and the Unity catalog. The Hive Metastore implementation is already in public preview for tech metadata capture, and the lineage is via the open lineage solution accelerator that we have. The Unity catalog, we just started a private preview of that. So you'll be seeing that very soon. We'll be enabling that in public preview as well. But if you want to try it and private preview, just reach out. We'll be happy to enable that for you guys to try out the Unity catalog integration. All right, I don't see any other question. If there are any over here, so go ahead. Yeah, so the way to think about that is that ultimately with the Power BI users, they should automatically be mapped as readers in the organization. So the time is up, but I can answer that question very quickly. So 90% of your organization should automatically be given a data reader role. In fact, everyone in your organization should be given a data reader role, because all they'll be able to do is search assets in the organization. And then there is a specific set of admin roles around curation, around scanning that we have. And similarly with insights as well, that needs to be given for those specific purpose built applications that we have. So, but generally, the way to think about that is entire organization should automatically be given a data reader role. You can script it out, and you can enable that for your organization, which means every Power BI user will be able to do that. All right, so if there are any questions, I'll stop outside or here and you can feel free to ask. But thank you so much for giving me and Blesson an opportunity to present. I hope that was useful for you guys. And we do have another session around updates and roadmap where we'll be talking about that, what we are doing in upcoming iterations. So please, I hope to see some or all of you over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.